Republican candidate for the 51st State Senate District. And here I was worried about pronouncing your name right, and I nailed it. So how about that?
Right out of the gate.
So Peter, let's get started with, just tell people why you decided to run for State Senate in the 51st.
And again, I want to thank you for the opportunity and the medium to answer those questions. Really, Robert, it started with a phone call from Senator Seward. It was in January, towards the end of January of this year, and Jim spoke with me and communicated to me that he was going to retire and felt that I should consider the potential for running for his seat. And after a couple of moments, and got off the phone and spoke to my bride of 34 years, just this past celebrated 34 years this past Sunday. I can't tell you exactly what she said, but it was crazy. With some few more discussion and a little bit more cajoling, she gave me her blessing. And really, what it boiled down to, and then morphed into, is with my local governance experience, with my county legislative experience, I felt as though that I am here to not only protect, but to continue with a lifestyle that I've been very fortunate to grow up under, in hopes of carrying that through to my family and ultimately to my grandchildren.
Based on your experience, because you are a Otsego County legislator, and of course you're also a business owner as well. So I wanted to start with the business background. I'm sure you have a lot of experience from this, but what do you think needs to be done to improve the business climate here in New York State?
One of the things about business, we're very tuned, we react quickly, if you will. And one of the interesting things about governance, if you will, or government, is really just almost the opposite. It's more of a top-down type of philosophy, where government says, we understand you, and here's a plan. When in reality, it should be the other way up. It should be from the bottom up. It should be listening to what these business people are saying. What is really their concern? What is important to them? And once you determine that, your path is clear. You'll be setting up those systems in place to assist small businesses. So it really needs to be a bottom up as opposed to a top down type of scenario. I think if nothing else, if government was to learn that, we would see a huge improvement in business.
So that, coupled with your local government experience, you certainly know the dynamics there between the local and state governments. How can that experience aid you, on the other side of it, if you're elected to the state senate and obviously making policy and making budget decisions that would impact local governments?
Really, it boils down to fully understanding the impact that Albany has. And I'll first start on a local level, being a former town supervisor and having put together my municipal budget for the town of Maryland, and fully understanding the impact that Albany has in two areas. One is communication, and the other is in the actual budget, if you will, things that are allocated. For example, CHIPS, which is what really funds municipal highway departments and highway improvements and things of that nature. And it was almost 80% of my budget when I was a supervisor. And there's some talk about cutting back or reducing, or just even the fact that we weren't sure how much they were going to reduce it and when. Those things put local municipalities at a disadvantage. You really don't know miscommunication, the lack of communication is really detrimental to putting together those budgets. On the county side, I can see where all those mandates and are being pushed down to the counties, and more or less making us the the entity that has to keep the financial house in order is it's detrimental to running a good government, a good county. So Albany has to realize that they really do those decisions that are made again are from the top down, not bottom up response. With my experience putting together those budgets, sitting on budget committee, being a chair of public works in Otsego County, I feel as though that'll be a huge advantage to understanding not only how it's set up, how it's allocated, but more importantly, how it's spent. So in those budgets, yeah.
An issue I know we talked a little bit about in our first interview is broadband, and certainly there's a great need for it, especially across the 51st. It's a largely rural district, and I know from the parts of Cayuga County that are in the district. There's 6 towns in Cayuga County that are in the 51st. That this is a real challenge: the access to high speed internet. So I know that the state has had some initiatives in the past, but what more do you think needs to be done to achieve this goal of extending broadband to all?
Robert, it's real easy. 2 words: get serious. And I say that because, in my case, and again, I can speak from personal experience, as a potential seated senator, I do not and will not have broadband service in my house. And in this day and age, post COVID, if you will, or pre, in COVID-19 and distance learning that came to light. Heck, I had kids actually, believe it or not, we have our parking lot here out in front of our office, and they were having to hook up to our, here in the office where we do have broadband, they had to hook up to it just to do their distance learning, to get in some of their homework assignments and things of that nature. So it gets serious. I mean, it's akin to years ago having electric brought to your house. And, I feel as though having this personal experience and having the ability to help facilitate, as chair of public works, I was able to actually get some companies to look at our towers, to negotiate some deals with them, to also not only look at the broadband issue, Robert, but kind of dovetails with cell service as well. And I'm kind of proud to say that with my public works committee, we were able to work with some other companies and take some of the tower spots that we have that probably aren't as not profitable to them, but wouldn't give them the amount of coverage that they were looking for. We swapped out the more the better sites, if you will, and we were able to negotiate a deal to where in our Morris area we were now getting cell service in an area that was never really covered by cell service. So again, it comes down to some experience. It comes down to identifying what the issue is and getting serious about the solutions for it. So get serious. That's the key word for this.
Okay. With the taxes, I think are certainly something that gets discussed a lot, not only in campaigns but in governing, because certainly in New York, depending on what you're looking at, income taxes, business taxes, what have you, property taxes. There's certainly concerns that that's causing some economic problems, whether it's leading to people leaving or what have you, businesses leaving. So in terms of that, from a state perspective, what do you think needs to be done to lower the tax burden in New York State?
And again, when you look at municipal budgets and you have your revenue streams and your allocations and your spending plans, it's been said before, and it's really true. Albany has a spending business, we use the term ROI, right? Return on investment. And I really feel that, yes, taxes are an issue, but if we spend correctly, if we invest those revenue streams into areas that will bring us an ROI, a return on our investment, um, our taxes will actually level out, and we won't have to raise them. And the other thing, when it does come to taxes, I will tell you this: I have very proudly been able to stay as a former supervisor, kept our tax cap, property tax cap, below the 2% level. And it came down to looking at where I spent that money, where it was best allocated, and then where did I get the most, I'll use that word, bang for the buck, our return on investment. So there's areas to look at for reducing taxes, but more appropriately, I believe it's the spending side of the equation to get our hands around.
I know that one thing that the state government has grappled with over the years is public corruption. There have been some legislative efforts, in this area to kind of root out corruption and impose different ethics rules for not only lawmakers and elected officials, but those who are in state service, as employees. So, I know that there seems to be bipartisan agreement on the fact that there needs to be more done to address this. I guess in terms of addressing public corruption, what would you like to see to make sure that folks are following the rules and that we achieve true ethics reform in Albany?
Great question. Um, Enforce the laws. Number one, I mean, enforce the laws that are there, and again, have an independent, nonpartisan entity to manage and to oversee that political process. I mean, that part of the process. I mean, I think that would be an important part to setting the tone, if you will, for let's get some ethics back into this. Let's not lose sight of what we are put here for, the public service side of things. And I believe if you were to enforce those laws and set up that entity as a non-bipartisan entity, I think you're on the right track.
I know that this is a concern across the district, but especially for the towns that would in Cuyahoga County that are part of the 51st. Water quality is a huge issue, with the Wasco Lake here, and that of course is a primary drinking water source for many residents in the county, especially where I am. I'm in the city of Auburn, which I know is outside the 51st, but certainly close enough to where you'll be. So with that, what do you think we need to do at the state level? There's been a lot of different efforts, whether it's addressing invasive species or combating harmful algal blooms. So, how do you continue those efforts in the state Senate? I know this is something that Senator Seward has worked on. So how do you plan on continuing those efforts if you're elected to the state Senate?
You really have two very engaged entities that are involved with this issue. You have the lake, and as you said, the quality of the water, all the ossuary capillaries that come off of the water between recreation, economic, and so on. And then you also have the farmers who have their economic buy-in, fertilizing the fields, and those type of issues. So two very important that are connected. And one of the things that I would like to see is, we have some really great higher learning academia, if you will, colleges close by. And I really think that instead of, again, the state or Albany coming in and saying, here's our answer to the problem, I think we get the two groups, the stakeholders involved. I think invite academia in. They would bring the science. They would bring, I think, new ways of addressing and looking at the issues from both sides. And everything starts with a conversation. It starts with um, identifying issues on both sides and working towards a conclusion to it. But as a food scientist and what we do, science is very important. And I think there are some issues, and I'm aware of some technologies out there that would greatly help that whole situation. So facilitate, I could help bring those folks together and start that conversation.
With uh, with economic development programs at the state level, there's been a lot of scrutiny of these programs, a lot of money spent, billions of dollars spent on these programs over the years. With some obviously good stories, feel good stories about businesses that are creating jobs and investing here and really thriving here. But then some other stories of money being spent and you're not seeing that return on investment, so to speak, that ROI that you talk about. With the state economic development approach, what do you think we need to do differently to ensure that we're not only helping businesses that are already here, but we're attracting more businesses coming in?
Well, number one, we should really look at rewarding those companies that are here. I believe that we were at a synopsis. We were at a meeting, and they brought up the same question: what would I do for economics? And I said it was finding that need, going out, sourcing potential customers and companies to um, come into the. Let me move this a little bit closer. There we go.
Yeah.
And we really have forgotten about those that are here. So the first key to economics and economic is stability, and we need to stabilize those companies that are leaving New York. Um, it gets hard to attract. I think companies coming to New York when they see the exodus of those that are leaving. So we got to build that foundation. We have to make companies here feel like they're wanted, two, that they're rewarded, and then from there we then I think look at getting private investors. I think we need to put private investors together with these companies that are doing a great job, and true economic development may be not so much always looking for the 800 job new company coming in because of all the incentives that they require to come here. Robert, I think it would be getting a private investor maybe together and taking a smaller company, investing in that, getting another 50 jobs, and maybe elevating a smaller company to a mid-sized company. I think that approach to economic development is easier. I think it actually is a more realistic formula for economic development than always looking at the large company with all the large dollars with pilot programs and tax incentives and those type of things. It's sometimes I wonder if it really is a good return on our investment.
The state's bail reform law that took effect in January has certainly been a lightning rod, shall we say. But coupled with that, I did want to get your thoughts on not only bail reform, what needs to be done there. I know that there were some amendments made to it this year, but it seems like, there's still a desire to do more with that to improve it. But also with this push for police reform, the state, just recently adopted, various police reforms, in the area of transparency, for example, with records. So, wanted to get your thoughts on both of those things, on how, whether you think that, any reforms are needed in those areas, but also how you would approach it, what things you think need to be done, whether it's policing or, on the subject of cash bail?
Well, number one, I think the bail reform legislation that was passed is an absolute disaster. And I say that because I've seen it firsthand sitting on my committee, public safety committee from Otsego County. And what we've essentially done is we've taken individuals that having gone through the process in the system and basically thrown them back out onto the streets, not always in the best way. And here's something to consider, Robert, that I don't think a lot of other legislators and potentially folks have seen because they're not that engaged to it. A lot of those individuals having issues with substance abuse, opioid, the opioid pandemic that we've seen, actually, one of the first instances that they would get for either some sort of mental health service or counseling and those types of issues is really when they have been incarcerated. And what we have done, and I've seen this firsthand, is these individuals that have come into the system and are let loose back into that environment, it's detrimental to them in that aspect as well. So we've taken the judges out of it. The judges, my mom being a local judge, understood the local individuals, knew probably more than any of our other judges that are making these decisions for these individuals. So I think it was, again, it may have had all the best intentions in mind, but the consequences that we've seen since then are really detrimental. And there's no doubt that needs to be repealed.
With looking at the state's environmental and energy policies, to kind of piggyback on the points about water quality, there's certainly this desire to try to address climate change while also addressing the state's energy needs. Curious to get your thoughts on what do you think the best approach is there? There's certainly a push to get renewables, whether it's wind, solar. I know that there's wind farms being constructed, solar arrays being installed. So how do you balance those things with the energy needs and obviously addressing climate change in the environment?
Energy is a huge issue and one that, as a businessman, I'm very tied into. I mean, our companies require energy, and the sources of those, the cost of those are all metrics that are very, very interesting, very important. The renewables and solar, wind. As a supervisor here in the town of Maryland, believe it or not, we had worked with a potential wind company, and we approved a wind farm at that time to come into the town of Maryland. We were excited about the possibilities that it would have offered to our local school and potentially, to some of our businesses. I've worked really hard on, believe it or not, a project here again in the town for a distribution center site. We have identified a distribution site here in the town for somewhere around a half to 3/4 million square foot site, and the building would lend itself beautifully for solar and for solar panels. So, one size does not fit all when it comes to energy. I'm really interested in looking at many sources, many forms of it. I don't think any one is the answer 100%. I like to see actually a mixture of those options. And when it comes down to the economics from a household to a business, they need to make those options. Geothermal is one that I'm really starting to get without being punished, warm and fuzzy about. It's actually something very very interesting to look at.
A couple more questions for you. I did want to get your thoughts on education. I know this is an issue that Senator Seward worked on as well. Here in Cuga County with the Auburn School District, which does extend into your Senate district, and then Moravia certainly among others. In other parts of the 51st, but this has been a long-standing effort to try and get high need school districts the aid that they feel that they deserve, quite frankly, that's owed to them. What will you do in terms of advocating, for those school districts, especially in the more rural parts of the state, to ensure that they get the school aid they need, especially in this pandemic, which is really putting a strain on many school districts across the state.
You really hit on it again, Robert, and coming from a rural area such as Skenevis, and there's no Skenevis has gone through some financial issues that are well known, and a lot of that is due to the fact that Albany has held back and or reduced the aid that was going to the schools. And if you look at it, at any community, the school is if not the essential, one of the major essential parts of your community. And I think it's a sad state of affairs when we can't find the money to properly fund these institutions. Now, again, there are costs involved, there are budgets, and we all kind of look at that, and there's probably some trimming that could be done at these budgets, but by and large, we really need to make that a priority. We need to find, again, the spending side of the equation, return on investment. Let's invest in our schools, let's invest in our students, let's invest in them in hopes that they stay here as a brain trust for us. And I mean, what better way to invest in the state than in its youth? I'm really interested in trying to find that type of funding in these rural districts.
And then to close, what types of things will motivate you in this job if you're elected to state senator? It's certainly an important task that'll be ahead of you if you're elected. What types of things will motivate you every day when you get up and go represent the people of 51st?
The first is being Papa. I recently was fortunate enough for my daughter to have a granddaughter, and so family becomes very, very, very important, very motivational force for me moving forward. I would love for them to have the type of experience I've had growing up in upstate New York. I mean, there isn't, and I think we can all agree, there's not a more beautiful place in the world. And I've been all over the world in business. I've been fortunate enough to have traveled the world. I'm fortunate enough to be able to say I've slept in all 50 states. And I come back to upstate New York. It's an absolute beautiful area. So motivation is family, number one. Second motivation is service. I serve locally on my local governance. I've served in the county. Again, as there, I serve as a volunteer firefighter and EMS provider. So service is another good part or a great part of motivation for me here in the 51st. And more importantly, I am going to carry that service, and I'm going to carry the voice of all of the constituents here in upstate New York, and more importantly in the 51st to all of them. I hear them, I feel I know them, and I will be their advocate when I get there.
Peter Oberacker, the Republican candidate for state senate in the 51st district. It's a big district. Do you know all the counties in it, Peter? Ultimate test here.
Do I know them all? Yes.
Yeah.
So we start with Ulster. We go to Delaware. We go to Schoharie. We're Otsego. We're Herkimer. We are swath through Shenango. we're Cortland, we are Cayuga, and we are Tompkins.
There you go. Not bad. Not bad.
And
Pop
believe me,
quiz.
I know that because I've been traveling them. So
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. Well, great. Well, great catching up with you. Thanks so much for joining us today. And a reminder to all the readers and viewers out there that absentee voting is underway. The applications, I think, are going out, and people have requested those, and the ballots are being sent. There's already some ballots that have been cast, and then we got early voting that starts just really just a little over 2 weeks. October 24th runs through November 1st. And then election day is Tuesday, November 3rd. So get out there and vote if you're in the 51st district. Again, Peter, thanks so much for joining us today.
thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.